All right, it's time to track some security innovation. This is where we talk about it's the innovation news of the week. We're looking at IPOs, we're looking at exits, we're looking at funding rounds, we're looking at launches of new companies. These are the people trying to solve problems. This is the R&D of the security space, and we try to take a look at it. We got 3 this week. We're going to talk about. Let me remind you first: the Social Engineering Rhode Island ticket sales are open. So if you want to go to the Social Engineering Rhode Island conference, it's Saturday, June 6th, to Salve Regina University in Newport, Rhode Island. If you go to https://ri.org, you too can register and check out all that content. So, Paul, you've been on the circuit. So
Yes.
when we talk about innovation and you talk about looking at startups, and right here, like we're going to break down where all they are. How much of this do you bring? I know when you and I have been on some of the shows and we talk to people, we'll say, well, hold on, congratulations. In fact, I remember there was a company last year where like, well, congratulations, you just got $1.5 million funding round of your A, like, good job. And they were like, who are you people? Like, why are you talking to me? And it was the COO was there, so he knew how to have the conversation. It was just kind of different.
And I have a couple of quick things to share before we dive into it. But along on that point, Michael, I often find that many of the salespeople are so focused on sales that they don't know off the top of their heads where their own company is with funding. I think my friendly advice is that if you work for an organization, you should be very intimately familiar with how much money you've taken on and what your revenue is. And a lot of companies will not share with me what their revenue is. I ask anyway. I'm like, so what's your funding and what's your revenue? Like, this is just between us. Like, I'm not going to, go on the show and tell everyone what your revenue is. Like, I want to know, like, what funding you're taking on and how you're doing with sales. And so a lot of times they'll be like, oh, that's private. I'm like, that's cool. Like, if you don't want to share it, I'm not going to push you on it. But it is a question that I will ask. Instead, I will then kind of pivot into, well, like, what's your average sale? Let's start with that, right? Like, what's your average sale and how many customers do you have? And then I can derive the revenue from that. And some very close friends shared some other ways in which to derive a pretty close revenue number.
I'm always shocked when people can't answer that question, Paul.
Yeah.
And I would say to them, listen, you know why
that
matters? Because your average deal size is going to tell me pretty quickly how many people are going to be involved.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You're over 50K as an average deal size, I guarantee I got to have at least 2 signatures on that PO in a typical enterprise. And some of you listening are going, 2. I wish I could only get 2.
Yeah.
I got to go get more than 2. And that's fine. By the way, I'm not saying you should sell cheap. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is, if you don't understand that, or you're not willing to be forthcoming with us on that, what you're worried about your price. Listen, if you're the salesperson that's walking in as you're opening, you go, I can give you 25% off list, then you should tell us anyway, because nobody cares. Yeah. And if you're not that person and you're establishing value with people, then I don't really care what it costs. Like what Paul and I are asking is, where are you at in the marketplace?
Right.
Who are you selling to? What problem do you think you're solving? What value you're creating? If your pricing is on point, it doesn't matter, right? And
right.
Give us a range. I don't really care. It doesn't. But yeah, it's fascinating.
Now, Jeff Mann asked me a very interesting question, Michael, that I wanted to chat briefly with you about on this show in the context of Business Security Weekly. And he was like, Paul, I kind of, I made a statement and I said the printed materials that I review and or get at people's trade show booths largely are useless. Not because the content is useless, but because I can go on your website, I can read your white papers, I can read your data sheets, I can read your marketing materials. Like, I can go do that at any time. I'm on the trade show floor talking with you because I want to actually have a conversation with you. So when I ask you what you do or what challenges you solve for people and you hand me a printed thing, that's not what I'm after. However, there's an exception to that rule, and we talked about it last week, and I want to underscore it this week because I believe it's so important. And that is, if you hand me something that lists out your products, and then in the next column is your problem or challenge that solves for your customers, and then the next column is your impact, I'd like to see every single vendor on a trade show floor in security have that for me when I show up. So if you could do that as your homework, that'd be great. I thought CA Technology is the vendor I mentioned last week that did that. That's the kind of printed materials that I would absolutely take, put in my bag. I would save that for later. I'd also love it if that was on your website too. I think that's a fantastic.
Yes.
That was great, right? So that was in the past 2 shows, that still stood out to me as something very compelling that I wanted to encourage more vendors to do. Now, the A for the day was not fair at InfoSec World because I got into talking with this person at the booth. They were showing me a demo. It was natural, because sometimes the other thing that they'll do at the booth is you start asking, well, what problems or challenges do you solve for people? Or what is your favorite product feature or whatever? And they're like, oh, let me just show you a demo. I'm like, no, hold on. Like, we're just talking. I don't need to see the demo right now. If I want to see something specific, that's great, but just don't jump right to a demo. However, I'm talking to this one person, and they're answering my questions very well. They're very well spoken, very knowledgeable about the industry, very knowledgeable about their product, their messaging and positioning, and the problems they solve. And then, lo and behold, it turns out I'm talking to the CEO. So, And
Well,
again,
okay,
it goes to my question of, like, who shows up at your trade show booth? Is it the CEO? Is it your event marketing people? Or is it everyone that's in between in sales and marketing?
How big are they that the CEO was there? Like, why was the CEO at this event?
I'm not sure. That's a great question. And I didn't find that person until the end. But obviously, they were my A for the day because, well, I was, I'm talking.
They nailed it. They can answer
They nailed
questions.
it. Right. They nailed it. I mean, and you don't have to be the CEO to nail it either. It just so happened that the person I was asking these questions was the CEO.
Of course, if you are the CEO and you can't answer those questions,
that's a red flag. Yes.
That's pretty shy. Listen, I got to tell you, I've taken enough briefings where I sometimes wonder how they've gotten to be the CEO.
Yeah.
But
and that CEO, who is Nelson from Avatir, was kind enough to play Hacker Movie Trivia, and didn't score very well in Hacker Movie Trivia. But we had fun.
Doesn't have to.
It doesn't have to. Yeah, that's what I told.
Winner in
I'm
your
like, dude, this is just fun. The more important thing was you answered my questions earlier at your booth. That's what matters, right? Not your knowledge of Hacker Movies. So yeah, he was great, obviously, based on all my stories I just told about Nelson. So thank you for being a sport and playing Hacker Movie Trivia, and also just being in the booth and being able to answer my questions was pretty cool.
That is really cool. Yeah, I want to underscore your point because, in all the years that because I work with both vendors and enterprise, every now and then, like, they'll bring me into channel marketing, and I always say, well, have we ever asked the channel what they want? Mm-hmm. And people go, well, no. Okay. Or they'll say, well, yeah, they want to stay relevant. I'll go, well, but have you ever, like, walked a mile in their shoes? Because if you're in the channel today, if you're a VAR and you're doing a good job, you've got local relationships, you might carry a bag with as many as 80 to 100 different things in it. Memory work tells us you'll probably be familiar with 10, but have 3 to 5 that you go to. And I've never once had anybody in the channel say, what we really need? We need another battle card. I need another data sheet. That's what's going to tip the difference. But Paul, what you just described when you walk the show floor is they're going to give you battle cards and data sheets. Mm-hmm. And nobody cares because emotionally you're trying to understand what problem are you trying to solve? Do you understand the problem in a way that works for me? And do I have any belief that you know how to solve that problem? Mm-hmm. But if you look at it, and I even retweeted, somebody else said it this week, but if you're the person who can define that problem better than I can define that problem, then you've got to be the person who can help me solve it because you understand it so well.
Right.
And I wish more companies would just spend time on that because, gosh, we would all be better off. So
absolutely.
We'll see where that goes. All right, not a ton happening this week because apparently it was all last week, but there's still some big movers this week. So the rumor is, and I know you worked here, but Tenable hired Morgan Stanley to prepare for their IPO, and it looks like they're looking to IPO in the fall. Rumored to price so that they'll be worth between $1.5 and $2 billion. So far, they picked up that big $250 million funding round in 2015. They've got about $316 million raised. It's worth noting Zscaler upped their IPO and went big. Dropbox, due to oversubscription, just upped their IPO. Mm-hmm. Side note on Dropbox, though, it looks like their post-IPO valuation may be less than their last private valuation. And then you get into the nerdy stuff about Series A versus Series B's investors and liquidation and everything else. But the point to this is, despite all the doom and gloom, and the IPO market just can't handle it, it looks like Tenable is rampant to go and probably going to do, at least looking to make a big splash with it.
Yeah, and I don't think this was unexpected, certainly from anyone.
Doesn't feel like a surprise. Yeah.
Right. Anyone that analyzes the market or anyone who works in enterprise and is a consumer of vulnerability management products knows that there are 3 big players. Now, they're all differentiating themselves in a variety of different ways, and there's a whole bunch of other players that are trying to add value in a lot of different ways as well. However, if you look at the 3 big players, that's Rapid7, Qualys, and Tenable. Tenable's the only one that's not public yet, so there you go.
Yeah, and the other ones are doing well. So I think that,
exactly.
And the timing is right. Like, this feels a little bit like, if you don't do it now, when are you going to do it? Like, you got your big round almost 3 years ago. It's time everybody to go, and that was a huge infusion of cash. and we've seen obviously lots of changes. And so, wish them success. Hope it goes well. And I know those of you with stock options are also hoping it goes really well. So it's for everybody. I mean, I figured why beat around the bush? Let's just call it the way it is. Sift Science, $53 million Series D. So this is definitely growth money, big time growth money. Real time machine learning, fraud prevention for retail and travel sectors. This is got to be the third or fourth one that we've covered. And in the article there on VentureBeat, there's about 3 other companies that we didn't cover that have picked up. So what this tells us is this is a hot area. Now, right now, they've picked up about a little over $100 million in funding over their rounds. So this is big. So what we start looking at now is, all right, so what's that exit look like for them? And what are their potential options? And I'm going to be curious to see where this ends up. But here's the thing when you think about fraud prevention. And again, Jack Daniel's not here. And those of you that have watched on PSW know that Jack and I love talking about chip and pin. And since he's not here, I won't misrepresent anything other than to say we pushed chip and pin. And I appreciate how it got implemented is different than what we were all promised. But it was about fraud. But the problem was it was all for card present fraud at the very time that the trajectory for online transactions was taking off radically. And all we've seen is a very effective transfer mechanism from offline fraud or in-person fraud to online fraud. So it's not really a surprise to me that we're looking at all these different ways to better identify who you're dealing with, better authenticate who you're dealing with, and of course, look for and terminate fraud before it becomes a problem. I think it's great. So this is just another example of that. $53 million is huge. I mean, that's some serious growth money. And they're one of about 5 or 6, and I haven't seen a real category king in this particular area. I see a lot of people fighting to make a name for themselves. And the last one of the week, Virsec. Is that how you say it, Paul? Virsec?
That's how I would pronounce it. I have not heard of them. I think they
were new to me too.
Their tagline is oddly specific, and the only reason I find that odd is because so many of the companies we list in this segment of the show, their tagline is very general. This one is very specific. I want to praise it, but I'm not quite there yet because I haven't heard of them before. But I like that. I actually like the fact that they're specific. That's cool because it's different.
So funny that you bring that up, Paul. I had the exact same thing looking at this. So they're a cybersecurity company, and what it says on Owler is they protect server-side and web applications from indefensible memory-based cyber attacks. And what's interesting is if you go to their website, like I'm not thrilled with this stop looking backwards, future-proof cybersecurity, but when you scroll down, you go to just below the fold, they've got 4 things. So, I'm twitchy because it's 4.
Yeah,
but it basically says, all right, and it's funny because it's answering our questions just out of sequence. Malware tools only spot what they know, not the unknown threats. Okay. Memory corruption is at the core of today's most damaging attacks. I'd love for them to substantiate that better and give me some examples.
Agreed.
But for a graphic and 3 lines, okay, I'm on, and it's a flow. Virsec knows what your apps should be doing and instantly spots deviations.
Yeah,
all right,
a lot of people
the first person to claim that.
Sure.
Interesting, and then stop attacks. So we're the only vendor to detect and stop memory attacks in real time. See, so the problem they committed here was tell me the problem, push on the consequences, tell me the solution. What I would have loved to see here is to say, so the solution is you need to stop this in real time. Let's show you how we do it. Because once you go into the hyperbole, we're the only one who could. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that's a true statement because you're telling me you're going to whitelist processes and you're going to sandbox stuff and whatever. Like, I'd like to say I didn't waste time figuring out exactly how they do it. But let's go back to your other point. Oddly specific. And so I look at this and I go, this is kind of interesting. But you know what I'm willing to bet? They're selling to an oddly specific group of people. Yeah, this isn't a general sale. This is somebody who's working on this saying, well, what do I do about memory? And they're saying, look, we have an answer for what to do about the memory. And I thought that was kind of cool.
Yep.
And then kind of like you, not sure if I'm celebrating or not. I'm just kind of going, not what I've expected. But here's what I'll tell you right now. So they've raised $29.6 million over 3 rounds. This is a $24 million Series B. So don't worry about the fact it's a Series B. At $24 million, it's a growth round, period. So that's a huge round. And if you're getting a growth round as your Series B, and previous to that, you've only raised about $5.5 million. Like you've got something figured out here where an infusion of $24 million should really bring you to the marketplace. So we're going to keep an eye on them. If you've worked with them or if you know more about this, write in, tell us. Let us know what you think about it. and how it works. Because I think it's interesting, and obviously memory and chips have been in the news a lot lately. So they're not new stuff, but we're paying more attention to them, and I think we'll keep doing that. So it's another show in the books, an exciting show. I look forward to Fridays. This is always fun, so I enjoy it. So you can catch Paul at Security Weekly on Twitter. You can catch me at Catalyst. We're both there. We're both active. We respond. You can get us on the Facebook. You can send an email to us. Find us on the LinkedIn. We're always going to be responsive. We'll see you next week, 1 p.m. Eastern. We'll be live on Facebook and YouTube. Until then, I guess have a safe week. Have a good week. See you then.
Thanks, everyone.